The first scream came from the back of the plane. At 37,000 feet above the endless stretch of dark ocean, panic spread faster than turbulence. Passengers turned their heads in confusion as a man in an expensive tailored suit suddenly collapsed in the aisle, his body shaking violently. The flight attendants rushed toward him, their faces pale as they tried to understand what was happening. The man's breathing was shallow, his skin turning gray, and within seconds the entire cabin filled with a thick, suffocating fear. Somewhere in the chaos, a small child began to cry. But one man stood up calmly. He wasn't dressed like the others in the business-class cabin. His clothes were simple, faded jeans, a worn leather jacket, and tired sneakers. In one arm he had been holding his sleeping 5-year-old daughter moments earlier. Now he gently placed her back in her seat, whispered something comforting into her ear, and walked toward the collapsing man. That quiet man was a single father named Daniel Hayes. And within the next 10 minutes, he would save the life of one of the richest men in the world, and then disappear without a trace. Before we continue this powerful story, take a moment to support the message behind it. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes who walk among us, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in humanity, and subscribe to the channel Kindness. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach hearts around the world. The flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo had started like any other overnight journey. Most passengers had settled into the quiet rhythm of travel. Movies flickering on screens, blankets tucked around shoulders, the low hum of engines creating a strange sense of calm above the clouds. Daniel had boarded early, guiding his daughter Lily carefully through the narrow aisle. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit that had clearly been loved for years. Her hair was tied into messy pigtails, and she kept looking out the window with wide wonder. To her, flying felt like magic. For Daniel, it felt like a risk. He hadn't traveled in years. Money had been tight since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Cancer had taken her slowly, painfully, leaving Daniel alone to raise Lily while juggling 2 jobs and endless responsibilities. Sleep had become a luxury, and hope often felt distant. But this trip was important. Daniel had finally saved enough to take Lily to visit her grandmother in Japan, his late wife's mother, who had never met her granddaughter in person. The journey meant everything to them. What Daniel didn't know was that sitting just a few rows ahead was billionaire tech magnate Victor Langford, a man whose name appeared constantly in business magazines and global news headlines. Langford was known as a ruthless genius, brilliant, powerful, and almost untouchable. But power means nothing when your heart begins to fail. When Langford collapsed in the aisle, panic took over instantly. A flight attendant knelt beside him, trying desperately to wake him while asking if any doctors were on board. No one responded. Passengers looked around nervously, unsure what to do. That's when Daniel stepped forward. Years earlier, before life had changed so drastically, Daniel had served as a combat medic in the military. He had spent years learning how to act calmly when seconds meant life or death. Those instincts had never truly left him. He knelt beside Langford, checking his pulse with steady hands while quickly assessing the situation. The symptoms were clear: severe cardiac distress. Without immediate intervention, the man would not survive the flight. Daniel spoke calmly to the flight attendants, guiding them through steps with quiet authority. He asked for the medical kit, oxygen, and the onboard defibrillator. His movements were precise, controlled, almost mechanical. The cabin had fallen into a tense silence. Passengers watched in disbelief as this ordinary-looking father took control of a life-or-death emergency thousands of miles from the nearest hospital. Langford's breathing grew weaker. For a terrifying moment, his pulse disappeared entirely. The flight attendants froze in panic, but Daniel did not. He began CPR immediately, counting under his breath, pressing rhythmically against the man's chest. Sweat formed on his forehead as the seconds stretched into an unbearable eternity. Then came the shock. The defibrillator beeped loudly before Daniel delivered the charge. Langford's body jerked. Everyone held their breath. Another shock, another attempt. And then suddenly, there it was, a pulse, weak but real. Langford gasped for air, his lungs filling violently as if he had just surfaced from deep water. The entire cabin erupted into stunned murmurs. Some passengers even began to clap quietly, unable to contain their relief. A life had been saved. The pilot diverted the plane to the nearest airport where emergency medical teams rushed aboard. Paramedics quickly surrounded Langford, stabilizing him for transport. But in the chaos that followed, something strange happened. Daniel disappeared. By the time airport authorities and Langford's personal security team began asking questions about the man who saved his life, he was nowhere to be found. No one knew his name. No one had taken his contact information. Even the flight attendants only remembered fragments: his calm voice, the little girl sitting quietly nearby, the worn leather jacket. It was as if he had simply faded back into the world. Meanwhile, in a hospital room hours later, Victor Langford woke up. The first thing he asked was a single question: "Who saved me?" When his assistants explained that the man had vanished before anyone could thank him, Langford became strangely quiet. For a man who controlled companies worth billions, the idea that someone would save his life and walk away without expecting recognition was almost impossible to understand. Langford ordered his team to find him. Security footage from the airport eventually revealed Daniel carrying Lily through the terminal, her head resting sleepily on his shoulder. They left the airport in a simple taxi, blending instantly into the endless crowd of ordinary lives. The search took weeks. Investigators traced the flight records, eventually discovering Daniel Hayes, a widowed father working 2 modest jobs while raising his daughter alone. When Langford finally learned the full story, something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, he saw the world beyond boardrooms and stock markets. He saw a tired father who had nothing, yet gave everything without hesitation. Months later, Daniel arrived home one evening after a long shift at a warehouse job. Lily ran toward him excitedly, holding an envelope that had arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter, not from a bank, not from a company, but from Victor Langford himself. The letter contained no grand speeches, just a simple message of gratitude and an offer to fund Lily's education, provide financial stability for their future, and ensure Daniel never had to struggle the way he had before. Daniel stared at the letter for a long time, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't fully explain. He had never expected anything in return, because kindness to him had never been a transaction. Before we reach the end of this story, we want to ask you something important. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps keep stories of humanity alive. And before the final moment of this story, we have a special request. Comment the word kindness below if you believe simple acts can change lives. Years later, Lily would grow up remembering only one thing clearly about that flight: not the fear, not the chaos, but the moment her father stood up without hesitation to help someone in need. To her, he wasn't just a single dad. He was a hero, and somewhere in the world, Victor Langford never forgot the stranger who reminded him that the most powerful force on earth isn't money, status, or influence. It's kindness. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who disappear quietly, leaving behind nothing but the lives they changed.